All right, Chad, thank you for joining me again today.
It's nice to be here. Nice to see you.
Thanks, man. So last time we discussed remote work, and we got into quite a bit of detail about remote work. So for the viewers who didn't watch or haven't watched the previous talk show, that's definitely one you're probably going to want to catch up on. And we said that from there we're going to lead into remote learning. And what does this mean? What is this remote learning? Many are familiar with it, and I thought I'll kick us off because I've got some very interesting little stats that I'd like to share, and then please just come in when you're ready. Just a very interesting little statistic. Remote learning is not something new. It's something that's been around for quite some time. And a survey that was done in 2016 already showed how 1/3 of college students were studying remotely. And that was back in 2016. So it's not like it's something completely new. There was nearly 6 million students back then already. Yeah. And so with all this that has happened, with people now working remotely and with businesses now segregating how they operate, and with hybrid work sort of coming into play, how does that affect how people learn? Because one of the things that we actually raised last time was what a challenge it is for workers to be seen. They feel like they're invisible. And so it's really a challenge to make progress within the organization and to move up a rung, because you're not seen. And so you have to fight to be visible so that you can be seen. And so to do that, you need to educate yourself. You need to continue with that program of learning and to educate yourself. What are your thoughts with regard to remote learning? Have you got anything you'd like to share with us with regard to this change now?
Well, I definitely say that with regards to remote learning, before you actually enter into a field, you obviously need to do a lot of upskilling. You need to, as quickly as you can, build up as much information as you can. And if you are remote learning, you are getting used to doing that. And when you enter into a field, especially if it's within IT, you have to constantly stay ahead, and you have to keep remote learning throughout your career. So I think that it is you're getting used to it, and you're finding sort of the pathways of remote learning. And I think that it's beneficial to start with remote learning if in certain industries, and then obviously there are some industries where you simply can't. But if we look, Forbes launched, there was a document that it was more of an article discussing remote learning. And it said students that steeped into remote learning ended up being more agile, they were more digitally fluent, and they were more in command of their own learning. And I think that this is a very positive step forward.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think people who aren't used to learning remotely will have the equipment that they need. They'll have measures in place. They'll be very structured and scheduled, and they'll be used to an interface where they're either participating in a video presentation where they then have to do an assessment, or in an actual virtual classroom setting. And so when it comes to actually meeting with the team, when they're in a work scenario, working remotely, that just comes naturally because they're already adapted to all the paradigms that come with this change from warming a seat at the office to actually working remotely. So I think from that perspective, people who are remote learning are already better adjusted to remote work than people who didn't.
And I think that we're talking about sort of the general population here, but if you speak about the outliers, even the sort of majority of the outliers, people with anxiety, social disorders or differences, people who struggle with human interaction, ADHD, all these sort of symptoms, they say that when you work from home, you have less distractions, and you're able to, people who can't emotionally deal with studying at university or studying at a college, they would have a massive advantage studying at home because obviously they won't have to deal with the sort of social pressures that come along with that.
Yeah, it definitely will be easier for people with certain personality types than for others, right? Absolutely. But you get your different kinds of remote learning. You get your MOOCs, your massive open online courses, where it's a recording which can be viewed by millions of people simultaneously, and then you can do the assessments. And I think a lot of progress has been made as far as that's concerned. And then, of course, you get your in-person training, which is provided by somebody who actually provides the learning in person. And it's via video conference. There's a very strong interaction between the learners and the instructor. And so obviously the MOOCs versus the in-person methods each have their own advantages and disadvantages. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that if I were to step back even from that, and I would say that, you know, that's specifically two different types of learning. But when you look at studying at a university or at a college, the instructor will try and cater for the majority of the individuals who are there. But when you study from home, you can find a study method, personalize it for yourself. And I think that these two are examples, but you could actually, you know, find any solution to learning. I mean, personally, I've got ADHD and I struggle when I was studying. And the advantage that I had when I went to homeschooling is that I was able to find personalized learning for myself. And I thrived with a combination of both dealing with people and dealing with physical objects that I could touch. And so that's why when I jumped into the computer, that was a massive benefit for me personally. So, and that's something I may have not found if I wasn't studying from home.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing your personal experience with that as well. It was actually in 1923 that Thomas Edison argued that video clips would completely replace teachers and books. And so it hasn't happened yet. And personally, I don't think that it's going to happen to that degree. But certainly computers have made a very big difference to how learning can take place. And it's certainly now, with this change of people working remotely, remote learning just falls so nicely into that space to make it possible for people to continue to be educated in the line of work that they're in. And like you mentioned, obviously this isn't appropriate for all industries, because sometimes you need to actually get your hands dirty. A motor car mechanic can get a lot of theory on how all the different components fit together and how each of those work. But it's only when you're actually physically working with the machine and taking it apart and reassembling it that you get your real practical, right? When you're dealing with real problems, and that's where the real learning takes place for certain industries. But definitely from an IT perspective, the IT industry seems to have adapted very well. And of course, other theory-based industries, that is the case too, your financial, your law, and of course, software development, IT, and so on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you said now that you think video is going to take over, but Microsoft is actually taking that a step further. There's a game called Minecraft, and I think the majority of everyone here will know that what it is. And they're actually using, they have an education system now where they're trying to bring up young people, especially people who have challenges with social interactions within Minecraft. And they're using sort of, they're trying to drive meaningful learning. They're trying to prepare for a digital future. They've got advantages for social and emotional skills that they're building through the imaginative worlds in Minecraft. And, you know, it's these sort of, and it's these sort of unique drives that these companies are having, these organizations are pushing, that is going to make learning easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the way that MOOCs, for example, have grown, a recent survey showed that 60 million learners were added since 2020. for massive open online courses. So the growth is certainly there. But like I said earlier, there's a disadvantage to MOOC, and that is that it's not personal. And so I think the advantage to massive open online courses is the fact that because you can have so many people participate concurrently, you can reduce the overall cost of that. And so learning becomes more affordable in that respect. But some people don't thrive in that environment. And it's still more effective for learners to learn in a classroom type environment where there is a lecturer who is actually participating with them and sharing knowledge and running through a very structured curriculum, but listening for responses from them so that there's this interaction. And that's so powerful, learning from other people's questions and from their challenges, and hearing how those specific questions are being answered by the lecturer, or possibly sometimes even in my experience by other people who are participating, other learners who are participating in that classroom environment, is a very effective way to go forward, right? So anything that you want to add? We're going to need to wrap up fairly soon, but anything else interesting anecdotes that you need to add?
Well, I mean, I'd say that it's going to come down basically to discipline. What is your discipline levels, and what is your aptitude to learning? And if you are someone who can sit and you can teach yourself, that's a massive, I think, a positive, especially in the age we're living in now, when it comes to learning at home on the computer. And if it's your aptitude, then I think that it is something that I personally would always push forward. Because it is the future, whether we like it or not. And then, I mean, if you think about it, there's so many solutions to. You can actually be at home and be in a classroom. If you think of using VR as a solution, and you can be virtually in a classroom somewhere, anywhere in the world, with a random group of people who are learning the same thing as you. And so we're going to see what these organizations try and push, and we will see what the learning solutions are. But as of right now, if it is your aptitude, then I think that anyone who can sit and teach themselves at home has an advantage. Also, another thing to consider is that some people can maybe afford going to university, but they can't afford the trip there because it isn't sometimes exactly where they're living. They can afford the education, but they can't afford to stay nearby. It could be an expensive area, and we know universities specialize in certain things, so they can't necessarily pick where the university is. So I think that if you can somehow study from home, then that will be a massive financial advantage to these individuals.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That is awesome. So for our viewers, if you are in the learning department, learning and development department, HR department, or you own a small business and you're looking for courses that your team can participate in where it's instructor-led, please look no further than Successful Learning Solutions. Have a look at the courses that are on the website, successfullearningsolutions.co.uk. And I'm sure that you'll find a good selection of courses there that your team can benefit from. So we look forward to seeing you in one of those courses soon. So that's all for our discussion today, our talk show today. Next time, we want to focus on the hardware, the equipment. What kind of equipment does one need to be able to participate in remote learning, remote working, from a hardware perspective, from a software perspective? These are questions that people are asking and they want to be prepared. We've been forced into this setting now, and so now we want to see what we need to do to make sure that that we can take this forward. Thank you very much for joining me, Chad. I look forward to our next talk show.
Okay, thanks, Randall.